All right, guys, welcome to week 7. I'm having to record this in Microsoft Teams because for some reason our video recorder in Canvas is not working right, but I will embed it for you, so all you have to do is watch it in the show. Congratulations, you've survived modernism. We are moving into the postmodern period with lesson 12. First, we go through the political 1930s, talking about why the literature of the era became much more activist. A lot of that had to do with the Great Depression. So you'll be looking specifically at 3 writers, very important writers: Joan Dos Passos, William Faulkner, and John Steinbeck. And then we will move in for lesson 12 into the 1950s, into confessional poetry. And rest assured that the poetry from here on out is much more accessible than T.S. Eliot or Ezra Pound. And I offer you a definition of confessional poetry to give you an idea of what exactly we're talking about. The main thing is this week exam 2 is open. It does not close till Tuesday, December 1st at 11:59 p.m. So I want you to take your time with it. There's no need to rush in and to blow it out before Thanksgiving. I would rather you take the week and work on it, work on your studying. Think about how you did on exam 1. Think about your study habits. Again, these exams are very straightforward. And in the document, How to Study, I tell you specifically how to think about going over the material so you're sure you're in command of it. I'll give you just a little bit more expanded advice here. So on exam 1, it all comes from the lectures. So go through each of the 5 lessons and make sure you're in command of any terms or any specific background that I give. Know the difference between BTW, Booker T. Washington, and W.E.B. Du Bois, for example. In terms of modernism, know the characteristics, know the main content, style, effect, and context. I very easily give you an exam that asks you which of the following is not a characteristic of modernism or the modernist era. Within the modernist era, know the specific schools or specific terms, definitions that pop up. Know imagism, which was a school of modernism in the 1910s. Ezra Pound, William Carlos Williams, Hilda Doolittle, all associated with it. Know its main device. Know the background on the poems that I give. If I talk about how modernists may have cut down the poem, for example, Ezra Pound's editing of The Wasteland, you want to know that. Ezra Pound's distillation of In a Station of the Metro down from 40 or so lines down to 2, how he arrived at that specific image. You want to be able to know how the Wasteland contrasts to different poems out of the era. If I give you, you want to know the definitions of fragmentation, juxtaposition, and illusion, and be able to cite examples of each of those. Now, keep in mind the specific definitions of each of those devices. What does juxtaposition do? What does fragmentation do? What does illusion do? And can you recognize an example of those? If I were to ask you on the continuum of poets from the early history, which is the least modernistic, I expect you to be able to recognize that because many of you just did a discussion question on that. Know Eliot's Sherwood Anderson's definition of grotesques. Know what the iceberg theory was for Hemingway. Know any kind of term that pops up in these specific lessons. Really, I'm going over details in each of these. Know the difference between stream of consciousness and interior monologue, between Hemingway and Catherine Ann Porter. In terms of the Harlem Renaissance, know the main characteristics that Elaine Locke credited with creating the possibilities of having this new conception of what it means to be black in America in the 1920s. More celebratory identity, one that's not a problem. It was the Great Migration to the North. It was the concentration of black life in urban centers as opposed to being dispersed throughout rural communities. It was the celebration of Pan-Africanism, in other words, identifying the black identity with other African cultures, whether in Africa or in Cuba or in Haiti or any other sort of place where black people might be living and creating their own cultures. You want to keep in mind the differences between specific people in the specific poets and writers in the Harlem Renaissance. You want to know that Zora Neale Hurston, because she was focused mainly on Eatonville, Florida, generally did not celebrate the Great Migration as the other poets did. You want to recognize the differences between the genres. You want to know which of the works are poems, which of the works is a short story, The Gilded Six Bits, what's an essay, The New Negro is an essay. But you also want to know that Jean Toomer's Cane is sort of what we would call sui generis, or outside of genres. It's a grab bag of short stories, poems, prose poems, that's meant to give a kind of collage or kaleidoscope perspective of contemporary black life. You want to know what makes Toomer unique among the Harlem Renaissance is that he did not identify himself as black or refused to. So basically anything that's covered in the notes in essay or in the lectures is fair game for exam 1. Exam 2 is testing your reading comprehension. The way to study is to go down each work and be able to sort of in your mind summarize what's unique about that work, what's the main characteristics. Again, you should know why Up From Slavery is an entrepreneurial autobiography, and what specific things about his own identity Washington was denied that allowed him to create a sense of his own future. You want to know Du Bois' position on spiritual songs and what those are for the creation of black folklore culture and black identity. You want to know each of the modernist poets and the poems and what makes each unique. A lot of the test is identifying which of the passages from, Marianne Moore's poetry, or which of the following is from William Carlos Williams' The Red Wheelbarrow. And again, the way to know that is to go back through the poems and to look for what's the most important line. In some cases, it's the final line in Moore's poem. In some cases, the lessons point out the most significant lines that sort of give you the idea of the poem in general. You want to know, for example, what's the most important section out of Hugh Selwyn Mauberley? What gives it its most important connection to its era? And it's that part about World War I. You want to know in The Wasteland what speaker is, some critics say that is the real narrator of the poem. You want to know how Fitzgerald is using Babylon as a symbolism for modern day Paris. You want to be able to recognize what makes Cummings' poem different from what makes an Ezra Pound poem, or certainly what makes a Robert Frost poem. Part of the reason I keep making you plot different types of writers on a continuum is so you can see these differences between each of them and know which is more and which is less modernistic. In terms of the Renaissance poems, if I gave you a question like which of the following is not a river cited in The Negro Speaks of Rivers, and I give you the Euphrates, the Nile, the Congo, and the Tallapoosa, I expect you to be able to recognize the Tallapoosa is not a river in Africa, and that all of those others are Hugh's ways of identifying with the sort of ancient African civilizations. I won't give you one that says Mississippi, because he's drawing a parallel between Mississippi and those other ancient rivers. No very specific textual details. What are the main centers for Black life in the Harlem Renaissance? You want not just Harlem, but Washington, D.C., Chicago. We talk about each of those centers in different works. No characters especially in any of the stories. No, know the characters in Hurston's Gilded Sixpence. Know who Eugenio is in Flowering Judas. Know the narrator's name in Snows of Kilimanjaro. Not the narrator's, but the main character's name in Snows of Kilimanjaro. Again, be ready to identify a passage from Stream of Consciousness in the Snows of Kilimanjaro, or a passage from the related but different interior monologue in Flowering Judas. And those should be fairly obvious. Know which myths Hilda Doolittle is using in her poem Leda and Helen. Know the basic storylines behind each of those poems. And again, those are outlined for you in the notes, also in the author biographies that precede each reading. So again, for studying the notes, just go down the notes and make sure you know that material. For the readings, go down the syllabus and try to ask yourself, what's the most important line, the most important thing we've said in the lectures about each of those works? What are the most important details? The gist of it is part of the reason we have reading comprehension is because our minds we might look at the words on the page, but we aren't really taking it in. So making lists, writing about things, writing things down, writing definitions in your own words, that's a great way to study, as is going back through the notes and kind of going over details. All right, so if you have any questions, let me know. Again, I would wait till next Saturday or Sunday to take the exams. You certainly, if you want to wait till all the way till Monday or Tuesday, that's fine. It's better just to take the time to study than to rush into it. All right, if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we will be talking to you through email. Thank you.